Hey my friends, Sam Haymart with Test Driven TV. I have just spent the week with the 2022 Toyota Tundra 4x4, and this is a 1794 edition, a very well-equipped model. And so I've got a lot of experiences to talk about, both driving on and off the road, as well as showing it to you inside and out. And at the end of it all, I'm going to tell you what I really think. For the longest time, whenever I test drove a Toyota Tundra for the last generation, especially in the last couple of years, the conversation was always the truck's really good, it works well, but gee, it's getting really old. When are they going to do something new? Well, here it is. They've finally given us an all-new Toyota Tundra, redesigned from the ground up on an all-new chassis, new suspension, new powertrain, new bodywork, new interior. Everything about this truck is absolutely, completely redesigned and new. And as tested, the 1794 edition is $66,000 and some change. It's not the most expensive truck you can get, nor is it the least expensive truck you can get when you're in the Tundra lineup. Looking at this particular edition, it's always been sort of the cowboy western store. Farm 1794 is actually named after the ranch where the Toyota plant is actually situated today, just outside of San Antonio, Texas. And that was when that ranch was actually established back in the day. And then of course Toyota bought the land, put a factory on it. But it's sort of a nod to the history of where Toyota builds these trucks. Looking at the front, a lot of chrome, a lot of detail, a lot of sculpting, and it's just really quite dressy. LED headlamps. Down in the lower part of all of that chrome, LED fog lights. Coming around the corner, this has some pretty sculpted fenders. You can see that in the shadow lines, both at the front and at the back. Looking at the wheels, this one has 20-inch rollers with some Bridgestone Dueler tires. These are tires that are really more geared towards street driving, less about off-roading that you're going to find on some of the other trim grades. From this angle, I want to point out a few of the features the truck has. This has the power extending towing mirrors, so you can hit a switch inside, you can extend those out so that you can see around your wider trailers, which is kind of a nice touch. That is an option on this. This truck has a nice long look, and that is because this has a 6.5-foot bed. Optional, 5.5-foot bed is standard. And looking at the cargo box, this is a composite cargo box, very much like what they've done on the Toyota Tacoma for quite some time. It's made out of plastic, the entire cargo box. Nobody's really been complaining about it on the Tacoma, and I doubt Tundra customers are going to complain much here. You might say, well, plastic's not as good as metal, but the people who live in the Rust Belt states will tell you that it's not going to rust, so that's a good thing. Looking inside, you can see that we've definitely got a different type of material that's constructing here, and this does have the rubber mat in the bottom, which is a nice option on this, protects the bed, and also some pretty handy power outlets built in, LED lighting as well. Another little detail I thought was pretty neat on this truck is when you open the tailgate, it comes down soft open just like everything else, but did you notice what happened over here? We have a step, and it just popped out automatically when I opened the tailgate. Lets you get up and in here quite easily. Now, a lot of trucks offer a step like this, but I thought it was pretty cool that it's automatic, and when you put the tailgate up, it goes back in by itself just as well. It's pretty slick, I think. This does have the motorized running board on the side, which allows you to get up in. Now, I don't know how necessary this really is, given that this truck really isn't that tall. And frankly, I don't really like these that much because I find that they stick out so far. If you go to step in and lean in to get something from the truck, I am constantly hitting my shin on these things. Regular running boards that are fixed tend to set in a little bit further. The good news is you can turn these things off so they're not constantly coming out every time you open the door. You shut the door, in they go. But I just had them turned on here for the sake of our shoot. I've had them turned off all week to save my shins. One last look at the back. This is very tall looking back there, and that is because of those big bookends we call the LED tail lamps. The way they're designed, they're very tall, and they really enhance the tall look of that rear cargo box. And part of that is because that bumper does drop down pretty low, a little bit more of an integrated bumper design we've seen on past Tundras. And Of course, there is the trailer hitch receiver, and this does come with both a 4 and a 7-pin connector. In the past, the 1794 edition of the Tundra used to be what I called the Cowboy Western Saddle Shop sort of edition. It had rich browns and leathers, and it really looked like you were sitting inside of a saddle shop or something. And here, what we've got is something that's a little bit more effete, maybe a little bit more Austin than San Antonio, but certainly channeling some of that white Texas limestone that you see all over Texas when you're down there in the architecture, as well as some of the interior finishes. This has rich white leather, which I find a little bit strange in a truck. It looks really nice, it's comfortable, but I'm not sure I'd want to be working a ranch and jumping in and out of this thing with this color seats, but I really do like them. And on the dash, along the console, a lot of wood grain trims. I don't really believe it's real wood. It doesn't really, it's not that convincing. A lot of soft stitch trims, and the switch gear, because we are in a fully loaded truck, there are a lot of switches. There's a lot of features, way too many things for us to talk about other than to simply say there's a lot of stuff. You want to see what it all is, go to the Toyota website and it'll line you out on everything. I'll hit the high points though. Ahead of me is a 12.3-inch completely digital instrument cluster, completely customizable, and that does change its look with the different drive modes. And the steering wheel, leather wrapped, very nicely done. Switches on it for the infotainment center and some of the driving aids, things like that. And it is power, tilt, and telescope. Looking at the center stack, a huge infotainment screen. Just below that, hard controls for the HVAC and a number of things. Heating and ventilation settings for these seats. And then looking down at the center console, this is very well done. I like that they've retained a conventional shifter here. I love that much. I don't like the knobs that some of the trucks are getting. Down here, a nice place for your phone so you can see it when it lights up if something's going on. And it's got the wireless charger right there as well. Little opening for the cup holders right there. They're off to the side, out of the way of the shifter. To the side of that, you have drive mode selector and the switches for the transfer case. In the center console, a lot of storage. This is sort of an interesting design. There's a little tray here in the front that slides back and forth. There's a tray on the top that has some storage in it. Then you can open the entire thing, and there's a lot of storage in here. This is huge, absolutely huge. A lot of other options worth noting. Big panoramic roof. The front section does open, and of course it does have a shade that can close. Back window is a full power window. I absolutely love this. Drove around a little bit this week in the cooler Arizona air with all of the windows open, the roof open, that back window. It was just nice, absolutely nice. These seats are very comfortable, heating, ventilating, and I was able to get to a place that I found quite comfortable for the week pretty easily. Power seat over here, power seat over there. I do have memory settings on this side. Passenger does not. This has one of the most comfortable back seats in the full-size segment. Sitting back here for the first time right now for a video shoot, I want to stay back here for a while. These seats are comfortable, and that's for a number of reasons. First of all, they've just got a nice cushiony feeling, and they're supportive both on the sides as well as underneath. I'm sitting down in this seat, not on a flat bench, but look at the space that I have. These seats up here are set for my height, which is about 5'9" with my boots on, and I've got almost 12 inches of legroom between me and that seat. I could have a big 6'4" guy in front of me and still have plenty of legroom back here. But most important, the seat height is pretty good. I'm not like, my legs aren't perched up in the air like some of the full-size trucks. Now, that does come at the cost of headroom back here. It does feel a little bit low, but I still have about 3 inches above my head. I would only be taxed if maybe I was trying to wear my cowboy hat at the moment, but it's very airy back here, of course, with the white and this big window. But there are so many amenities back here that are quite surprising in a full-size truck. I've got heated and ventilated seats back here on this trim grade, 2 USB as well as an AC port, so you can plug in a laptop or whatever you happen to have. There's also window shades back here. That's kind of a new thing on a full-size truck. I'm sure everybody will have it at some point, but that's kind of cool. And of course, there is a fold-down armrest in the center here with cup holders. Almost kind of a throwaway thing these days. Everything should have that. These seats do fold up in a 60-40 split so that you can get into an area down below that has storage. Now, they've done something a little different here than some of the trucks. Some have a flat floor underneath so you can put big boxes and gear in here. Here, they've really partitioned this off and given it a bit of a tub there, which it just depends on what you like. I happen to like the big flat floor so I can put big boxes in here. But on the other hand, I like this. Then you can store things in here like air pumps or tools or things that you want to have for travels, road trips, things like that. And they're not going to roll all over the place. So just depending on what you want, it does have lots of storage under this seat. In all, I am very impressed with this interior. As I said, not sure I would choose white if I were actually using this in a working dirty environment, but if I were just using this truck like most Tundra customers are going to use it, which is going to Costco, living, going to church, soccer, whatever it is that you do with your Tundras, this is a very nice interior. One of the best I've seen in any truck. I'd really like to see some genuine wood in here, or at least wood that's more genuine than this. But outside of that, there's very little to complain about here. This interior gets 5 out of 5 stars. The infotainment system here is an absolutely huge 14-inch diagonal screen, touchscreen of course, and it is fully featured. There's a caveat with that, and that is to say that most of the features we're going to talk about here are subscription based, which means that they don't come free with the truck. You get a trial subscription, but navigation, all of the Google built-in features, a lot of the services, the cloud services, all of these things, and of course the satellite radio, go away if you don't pay your subscription. Then it becomes quite featureless. It's got a great backup camera, 360-degree views, works excellent when you're out there at the boat ramp is where I was at today. But backing it up and getting it where you want to be, you can really see what's going on around you. It does have good graphics. It's white. You can change that to a dark background if you don't like that, but moving around and navigating, it's very easy to use. This has JBL sound, 25 speakers, phenomenal sound, even with satellite radio, I might add. But of course you have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, both wireless. So this is fully featured. It's very easy to use. It's got everything you want to have here, but I am really turned off by the fact that Toyota sticks you with the subscription model, whereas most of the other manufacturers this truck competes with, they don't do that. You get all of those features and you get to keep them. So this is an infotainment system that, if not for that, would almost be a 5-star system. Here, it gets 4 out of 5 stars. All right, my friends, finally time to take a drive. So the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that this is built on an all-new chassis from the last generation, and there's quite a few things that are different here from before. The first thing is that this has a floating rear axle, 5-link suspension with coil springs instead of leaf springs. And the reason we do that in the truck is to give it a more compliant, a little bit more of a comfortable ride, and in theory better handling both on and off road than an axle that's tied a little bit more firmly to the frame with leaf springs can offer. And this also has the adaptive variable suspension dampers, which allow this to have a very compliant ride set on comfort and a bit more of a stiffer, more of a sportier ride when you set it all the way up to sport. And those variable dampers are set to the drive mode. And this also has the adjustable air suspension at the rear, which allows this thing to raise and lower, which can be helpful when you're hooking up a trailer, or when you have a load on, you can adjust the leveling. So what does all this give us? Well, when you're driving around town and on the highway, it gives this truck a very comfortable ride, no question about that. And if it gets a little bit too floaty and a little bit too cush, you can always adjust that with the drive modes. Out on the highway, this is pretty quiet. On our 70-mile-an-hour test, this rates out at 56.6 decibels, which is very quiet for a truck. And the loudest noise I hear out here really is the wind noise, more so than the road noise. So they've got a lot of sound deadening in here that really helps in that way. One thing I have noticed driving around town this week, in town over speed bumps, manhole covers, in and out of driveways, things like that, is that the structure does tend to have a little bit of flex in it, and I get a little bit of rattling in some of the interior trims, and like even in the back cargo box, I hear rattling from back there on occasion. Even with the adaptive variable suspension on the various settings, even on the Sport, I tend to get a sense that this isn't quite as sorted as I'd like. Sometimes I get just a little bit of, bounce and a little bit of behavior from the suspension that tells me it's not as well controlled as it should be. All of this handling on the pavement around town is great, but where a truck really needs to handle and feel like it's built well is off the pavement. So next up is the Desert Washboard Road. Out here, this is where I really get a feel for how well put together this truck is. How well sorted is the suspension and chassis? How well does it isolate us from all the nastiness and roughness of a gravel washboard road? What I'm noticing so far is that this isn't terrible. It certainly feels a little bit more solid than some of the aluminum F-150s out here, but I am getting quite a bit of rattling in here on the interior trims and quite a bit of body flex, frame twist and flex as I go through some of these washes and around corners. This is a truck that just has a lot more jitteriness, a lot more shuddering in the structure, a little bit more rattling and shaking going on than the previous generation, which to me was the hallmark. The previous generation Tundra was solid. It was refined. It was like you could always trust it. You always knew that it was never going to feel like a POS. And so while I'm not saying this feels like one, we're really right on the feather edge of this thing doesn't feel nearly as solid as the old one. I'm trying to be nice. Does that make sense? Out here on the gravel road and off the pavement, I think my final analysis of the chassis is that it is better than some of the American brands, but it just feels like it's not quite up to where the previous generation Tundra was and how graceful it used to just sail across surfaces like this. This chassis gets 4 out of 5 stars. Now it's time to talk about powertrain, and what we have under the hood here is a 3.4 liter twin turbocharged V6, 389 horsepower, and it has a 10-speed automatic transmission. And so if you watch my videos, you know the question I always like to ask is, how does it go? So we're out here in the middle of nowhere, nobody around, and let's see what happens. Shifts really well. And 60. Got a nice sound too. And that's really the most interesting thing here. This has a pretty small V6 with turbos. So all of the sound that we hear is sort of manufactured and tuned and designed for us to hear. And with the induction system and everything else, they made this sound almost like a V8. It sounds like a truck for sure. It doesn't sound like it's got a wheezing little engine under the hood. And so for most truck customers, that's going to be one of the most important things. It doesn't sound weak. It doesn't sound puny. I'll buy it. All kidding aside, this has plenty of power. It's definitely comparable to the V8 of the past in terms of getting you off the line and going. And when you set this to sport mode, it feels a little bit snappier. The 10-speed automatic transmission does seem to work well to snap off shifts the way you'd want them. The main thing that I really have to gripe about here with this engine is the fact that it's not nearly as refined, not nearly as smooth, and it just doesn't seem to work as well with you as, well, Ford's 3.5 liter EcoBoost V6, for example. That is a very refined engine that works very well driving around town. Here, around town, this always just feels a little bit grainy and rough, like especially sitting at a light with the air conditioner on, you can tell this thing's just struggling to give you a smooth running experience. And the next thing is fuel efficiency. This is rated at 17 city, 23 highway, and 19 mpg combined. I got nowhere near that this week, not even close. I hit barely 14 miles to the gallon in my week of mixed city and highway driving, and I wasn't really even pushing it hard like you just saw. That's just everyday driving, and I'm just cruising around town and a little bit on the highway. So really, I don't see fuel efficiency here that's any better than the old V8, which leads me to ask the question. I've got less refinement, I've got fuel economy that isn't notably better. Why even bother with all of this, you know? Now, yes, you can get the hybrid, which is the next step up here. Quite a bit more power, quite a bit more torque. Fuel efficiency, when I tested that, is about the same though. So they've gone to a lot of expense and engineering trouble to give us these smaller turbocharged engines, but I just don't see a result in everyday living. And the refinement, a lot of work to do there. this powertrain gets 3 out of 5 stars. All right, my friends, now it's time to talk about value, which is where we look at the price tag and, decide if that's a good price or not for what you get. $66,000 and some change. Not out of the ballpark, really. If you look at Ford, Chevrolet, Ram, maybe step into a GMC, this is where the prices are if you get a well-equipped truck. And I've seen quite a few others, brands that are a lot more money than this and didn't feel a lot more substantial than this. What you get here that the other brands don't offer is the anecdotal Toyota quality when it comes to reliability. Everyone who's ever owned a Toyota will tell you they never break, they're easy, blah, blah, blah. It's never a problem. It's not like those American brands, which are garbage. Now, of course, I'm speaking a little bit in jest, but you hear this all the time. And there is something to be said for Toyota's reputation for quality. Now, what I will tell you is that, and we've talked about some of the things, the actual build quality, how this truck feels, rattles, squeaks, is it solid? I'm not convinced it's better than the previous generation Tundra. In fact, I would have told you the old Tundra was one of the most solid, refined pickup trucks you could drive. It felt like a brick carved from a solid piece of steel. I don't get that here. I don't get that same feeling. What I feel here when I drive down the road is something more akin to an F-150 or a Chevy Silverado, which isn't a bad thing for everybody, but I'm very discerning about these little details. And I did notice that we're not quite in the same area that we were with the last generation Tundra. Now, performance in other ways, we're told is going to be better, fuel economy and all those things, and some of the other metrics that you can look at. So you drive one of these things and you make that decision for yourself. But when I look at all the different metrics that I use to talk about value, this is where it's at. I come in at 4 out of 5 stars. When you put that in with everything we've already talked about, we're a total of 4 out of 5 stars for the review. So there you go, Toyota Tundra for 2022. Now, if you like what we do, please follow us on social media. You can see all of our channels down below. We do a lot of stuff there that we're not going to do videos on all the time, some news bits and pieces, new reveals, things like that. You can see our latest video right there, but best yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel right down there, because either way, I want you to stay tuned.